Okay, so this is our LS7 oil pan that came off of the failed motor. The pan itself can be cleaned up and reused. We're going to have to clean out its passages real thoroughly and make sure it's alright. But the LS7 oil pan is a very specific oil pan for the dry sump oiling system. It has these passages cast into the pan, and it has these outlets that will lead to the dry sump tank on the passenger side of the car behind the fender, behind the front wheel. This is another issue with the heads and cam package that went on, is everywhere we see a gasket that was touched, we just see all this RTV that was put on the metal bonded rubber gasket. These gaskets do have a price to replace them, but if you have a suspicion that there's something wrong with the gasket, you should be replacing it. There is no reason to just squish RTV all over everywhere on these gaskets. These gaskets cover oil galleries and oil passages, and we shouldn't just squish contaminant inside of our oil galleries, and that's what's happened. Here on this gasket, as you lift it up, you can see underneath where the RTV was on the inside of the O-ring. As well, you can see a big chunk of RTV, just chunk on the side right there, just on the inside of the casting and here. And same over here at the oil filter. All it takes is a chunk of this breaking free and just circulating, you know, up or downstream to the pump and to the filter. Maybe it won't even make it to a bearing. Maybe it'll just start restricting the filter for you, you know. There's just no good reason to put RTV or gasket maker on top of these LS engine gaskets. There should only be a tiny amount put where the covers meet the block, and that's it. We got to get this pan cleaned up and ready for reinstall. Okay, we are getting ready to wrap up this motor and get the heads on and throw it back in this Z06 Corvette. One of the other things that we have to add to the Dart block so it'll work in an LS environment is this adapter kit for the windage tray. The Dart LS7 windage tray kit comes with the adapters to mate LS windage tray to the SHP block, and it comes with a stock standard LS7 windage tray. We could have reused the old one, but things were rolling around in the motor, so here's the old one. Right here's where it's all bashed out. We could probably reuse it, I guess, but for all that we're doing and building, we're just gonna install a fresh one. Call it a day. So before we lay the oil pan gasket down on the block, we do get to put some RTV down, but only a small dab and only in the four corners, right where the two covers meet, where they meet to the block. The gaskets that go there have a little rubber seal that will interact with the rubber gasket, but there's always a chance there can be a little leak there. So we're supposed to use just a tiny amount right at these seams to help the two gaskets join and merge together. And that's really the only place in the whole LS engine where we're supposed to have this stuff. The oil pan gasket we're using is a factory GM produced part. Almost forgot. Before the heads can go on, the studs that face down, that are threaded into the head, have to be installed into the head. And then the head can go on. There's no room or way to get the head studs in through the valley and installed up inside. So they have to be installed in the head before the head goes on the block. Setting up the stud kit on the LSX style engines is a treat. There is 23 bolts per head, or 46 bolts to be precisely torqued in 3 steps. And this is what it is to get to the 4 bolts on the underside of each cylinder head that are added in for the LSX head bolts. They go in directly over the center of the lifter guides, and they're facing down. So you got to get a washer up on them, and then you got to get the nut started in a very tight space. And on this block, the clearance between the studs and the block casting is not enough. And so we had to take our ARP washers and grind a little flat spot on them like this so that they'll still work on the block. The ARP nuts are 12-point nuts, and the head on them is smaller than the washer, and we've already test fitted it. They fit on just fine. So we just had to just clearance the 4 washers on each head just a little bit, just so they'll slip down on the block. But please, take a look and see what it takes to get these on, and imagine what it would be to try to get this apart and back together in the field, in a car, with the hood up on a flat rate dollar. It would just be difficult, to say the least. And now that all of our hardware is in place, we can break out the torque wrench and start tightening down some of the hardware. While it's customary to put all your bolts in on normal applications, on these LSX motors, when you're setting up all the extra head bolts, and especially if you're doing the studs, it is so important to get all your hardware in before you start torquing everything down. Aside from 23 studs on each side, there's also 23 washers on each side and 23 small nuts on each side, right? And 4 of those washers and 4 of those small nuts go inside of the valley facing up, and they can fall down inside of the motor, and your fingers have to work them in a very tight space. So it's very important to just have all your hardware installed and put on before we start torquing things down, just in case we got to go fishing for a bolt, so we don't got to, you know, wreck a head gasket or something like that. To tighten the head bolts that are in the valley, we need a 3/8 wrench and a torque wrench with a 3/8 drive. It's no mistake that the head of those nuts are 3/8. The 3/8 wrench is an extension for your 3/8 drive torque wrench. We put the 3/8 wrench on, angled down, and then the torque wrench goes in. We want to try to keep it as straight as we can. We don't want it to be at an angle. Right? Wrapping up the engine build. The last thing we're doing is we're just putting on the valve covers. Do you put a torque wrench on your valve cover bolts? Or do you just say, they're just valve cover bolts? If you're doing it at your house, on your car, there ain't nothing wrong with that. But if you're doing it for people, for pay, that is the difference between a professional and a shade tree. Every bolt on this engine has had a torque wrench put on it and has been torqued to spec as per the specs in Snap-on's ShopKey Pro database. as should be the case with any engine build. You know, I just can't do it. I can't bring myself to install a black engine in a Z06 Corvette. I have to turn it aluminum. Also, these LSX and Dart blocks that are steel, they paint them and then they mill surfaces on them. And a lot of people like the way that looks. It does look flashy, right, to have the freshly milled edges. And it goes in looking nice, but the problem is the freshly scratched metal oxidizes pretty quick. And so you'll set that nice, beautiful looking LSX motor in now, and a month or two from now, all of the places that don't have paint start showing their rust. So if you really want your build to look nice for a long period of time, or more than a month or two of being in your car, then it might be prudent to repaint the whole block, including the freshly milled surfaces, so that there's insulation on them from the atmosphere and the moisture. Now that looks like something that belongs in the engine bay of a Z06 Corvette.